Hi, I'm Doug Levy, the chef and owner of Feast. It's troubling times and I thought we would make something comforting. I can't think of better comfort food than grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, which everyone knows how to make, but we are going to make ours a little differently, make it a little more fun, make it a little more interesting, and with any luck it'll be enjoyable. So I'm going to start with a mirepoix of vegetables, that is to say, a diced up little bit of carrot, celery, and onion. Nice aromatic vegetables to kind of give our soup a little richness and a little character and a little complexity. I don't know if everyone knows the easiest way to cut up an onion, but we're going to do it right now. We're going to take the stem end off and split it right down the middle from the root end here. Okay, and we're going to just peel off this outer layer here. When I slice it, I'm not going to go all the way through the back of the onion. See how I'm leaving it all attached at one end? And that's just going to be more convenient for me. It's going to keep it from splaying out all over the cutting board while we're working. And then when I come at it from the other end, it just falls into a nice, neat dice. And again, just cutting, leaving it intact back here in the back half of the onion. And now I have a nice diced onion. I always like to use the back side of my knife to scrape things off of the cutting board so I don't dull it. You see people scrape with this side and all you're doing is taking the edge right back off the knife that you just sharpened. The carrot, I don't like to peel the carrot because there's, as long as you give it a good scrubbing, it's fine to eat the peel. It's got nutrients in it, it's delicious. So I take off one side of the carrot to give myself a nice flat, stable surface, and then it's easier to cut strips like this. And then when I go to dice it, it's quicker and easier. Now we're going to end up pureeing this soup, so you sort of think to yourself, why is he going to the trouble of dicing all of these veggies so finely? And the plan is this: when we have a lot of surface area on our vegetables, the surface is what's going to caramelize when we start sauteing it. And that caramelization is where all the flavor is. Carrots, onions, even celery has a little bit, but the carrots and onions in particular have a lot of sugar in them that you don't necessarily realize is there. But when those sugars start caramelizing, that's when you get some richness and flavor in your soup or whatever you're making. I've got a rib of celery that I'm going to do the same thing to. All right, so I'm getting my pan good and hot. We're just making a small batch here, but you can make as much or as little soup as you'd like, so you'll need a pot appropriate to the size of the batch you're making. I want to get the oil good and hot, but I'm using olive oil here, which has kind of a medium smoke point. So I don't want to put the oil in too soon and let it start smoking. I want to make sure I get the pan a little warm. Then I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil And I can sort of see by how easily it rolls around the bottom of the pan whether it's hot or not. I can also take water or liquid, and when I flick a little water in there, I can tell that it's good and hot, right? The water's evaporating and the pan's sizzling. So I'm going to put my onions in and my carrots. I'm putting the onions and the carrots in first because they have a little more sugar in them, a little less water in them, and I want them to caramelize. The celery is pretty much almost entirely water, so when I put that in, it's going to start preventing the other vegetables from caramelizing. So I don't want to do that just yet. I just want to get some color on these veggies. And that's going to take a minute or two. So once I see a little bit of color on the onions and the carrots and they start wilting a little bit, and what water they've released is evaporated out of the pan, I'm going to add the celery, do the same thing. Again, I'm not going to really see much color on the celery. It's mostly just going to wilt. But it's got that nice vegetal flavor that it's going to add as kind of like an underpinning to the soup. While it's simmering, I'm going to show you about smoking the tomatoes. We're using canned tomatoes here for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're consistent. We don't have to worry about ripeness. They're harvested at ripeness and canned. I also like that they're already peeled, and we'll get into why that's important in a minute. But the first thing I'm going to do, and the third thing I like is that they're packed in their own juice, so we're going to use the juice as well. The first thing I'm going to do is just crush these a little bit. So I'm straining them, saving that juice, but crushing these tomatoes. And here's why. Again, it's the same question as we had with the vegetables. We're trying to create as much surface area on the tomatoes as we can. And the reason that's important, and the reason it's important that the tomatoes are peeled, is they're going to hold on to that smoky flavor. So if you smoke a tomato that's, whole and fresh and still has its skin on it, you're not going to get much smoky flavor because the skin is going to repel that smoke, and then when you cut it open, none of the smoke will have penetrated. So when I break these up, I'm giving the smoke a place to stick on the tomato. I realize that not everyone has a big industrial smoker at home, but you can make a smoker on your stove top as long as you disable your smoke alarm or you have a good exhaust fan. And all I'm going to do is take this big stock pot. I'm going to line it with aluminum foil so that I don't have to worry about the bottom of it and cleaning it. And then I've got some wood chips here that I've soaked in water. And I'm just going to put a few wood chips in the bottom. Soaking it in water just makes them last a little longer as it smokes. And what I'm going to do is transfer these tomatoes to something with a hook on it, whether it's a strainer or a pasta colander, because I want it to hook into the pan, right? And then I'm going to spread the tomatoes out so that they absorb some of that smoke. And fire it up. And add a lid. Now the lid's going to let a little bit of smoke out because we've got this hook here and this handle kind of getting in the way, but it's going to contain the smoke pretty well, and it's going to give those tomatoes a nice smoky flavor. I like to use alder wood or apple or cherry. I find that hickory and mesquite are really great for smoking meats because it's a nice, bold, strong flavor, but it's a little too much for vegetables. So I like alder, and that's what we're going to smoke the tomatoes with. Okay, so my veggies are just about done caramelizing. I've got a little flavor in there. When you caramelize vegetables, all those sugars I was talking about, some of them are going to remain with the vegetables, but some of them are going to stick to the bottom of the pan, and that's what we're after, is all that good sticky caramelized goodness at the bottom of the pan. But the question is how to incorporate that into your soup. And the answer is deglazing. So I'm going to take all this tomato juice that we saved from before and pour it in. And what that tomato juice is going to do is release all that burnt brown stuff at the bottom of the pan into the soup. So we're going to get this nice rich flavor here. I don't want it to be all tomato and super tomatoey, so I'm going to add some stock to mine. If you choose, you can deglaze with the stock every bit as well as you can deglaze with the tomato juice, but I just don't want it to taste entirely like a Bloody Mary. So I'm putting a little chicken stock in mine. If you're a vegetarian, you can use vegetable stock. If you really want to make it serious and dark, you can use veal stock or beef stock, but that's the plan. I'm also going to put some herbs in here. I've got some fresh thyme, and thyme is kind of a pain to pick. These teeny tiny leaves are really difficult to get off of the stem. And so really, quite frankly, because this is all going to be pureed, it doesn't matter what happens with these stems. So I'm just going to throw the thyme in as it is and let that flavor be pulled into the soup, and then we're going to puree it and strain it. So if there are any little twigs, any little bits of stem, we'll be catching those when we strain the soup. Okay, our tomatoes have been smoking for a little bit, and with any luck, we get this good burst of smoke, that alder kind of permeating the tomatoes, and that's what's going to infuse that smoky goodness into our soup. Even though we're smoking the tomatoes in their entirety, we've still got all this broth and tomato juice and veggies that aren't smoked, because we don't want it to be a smoke bomb. But I'm going to take these guys and add them to my soup and simmer it a little longer. And stir them in, kind of diffuse that smoke throughout the soup. And we'll just let it simmer and bubble for a few minutes. The important thing here to remember is another thing that you add, and that's the most important, that's the key to the whole recipe. There you go. So now my soup's been simmering for a while, the flavors are all married, and I'm going to puree it so I have something nice and smooth with no thyme stems in it. And this is also a point at which I can taste it and decide, does it need anything? The tomatoes give it a lot of acidity, so you might want to add a little cream at that point. Maybe you don't, maybe you like yours a little brighter. The choice is yours. But we're just going to puree this in little batches. and strain it back into our original container here. And I'm going to press it through this sieve just really gently. And you can determine with the coarseness of your sieve how thick and hearty your soup is going to be. This one's quite lean because it's a pretty fine sieve. So we're giving up all this fibrous stuff here. I wish you could smell this. You just get a little hint of that smoke and that richness from the other vegetables besides the tomatoes. You can also see that we're leaving behind all those stems, right? Here's some now. Now that my soup's all strained, I can put it back into the pan, because as you can see, it's the tiniest bit thin, so I'm just going to reduce it a little bit. Simmer it for another minute or two, and let some of that excess water evaporate out. This is a point at which, if I felt like it, I could add a little cream. Maybe I'd put a little lemon juice if I wanted to brighten it up, a little cream if I want it richer, a little bit of whiskey if I really want to punch it up. Now we're going to make our grilled cheese sandwich. I've got this big chunk of raclette cheese here. Raclette's a Swiss cheese. It tastes fairly similar to Gruyere, but whereas Gruyere is something you make fondue out of, you melt in a pot with some alcohol. Raclette is traditionally sliced and then heated from the top. It sort of goes into this raclette melting machine where there's a flame above it, and you melt it on a little paddle and then spread it on bread. So it's a really nice melty cheese. It really melts well for the sandwich. I've grated it to help it melt even more quickly and evenly. We're going to put onions in ours, and so I've got some of those onions that I cut up earlier for the soup, and I'm going to start caramelizing them. So again, I'm going to warm up a little olive oil. So we're going to caramelize these onions, and I'm just going to put that olive oil in the pan again, a little bit of salt and pepper. Not too much because the cheese is going to be kind of salty. And I'm going to saute these, get a little color on there, and turn the heat way down and let them caramelize. Now that we're starting to get a little bit of color around the edges, we don't want to char these, we just want to caramelize them. So we're going to turn the heat down and just let them simmer very slowly. And that's going to caramelize those sugars. The leek is going to give us a second kind of onion flavor, so we're looking for layers of complexity here. Leeks grow just like a regular onion, but they're packed in mud, which is why they don't get any light here and they don't produce chlorophyll down here. So this white part has a really subtle, not super vegetal, kind of sweet flavor. The problem with packing these things with mud when they grow is that it gets caught between the layers So they need a thorough washing. We're going to ignore that and only use this end of the leek, so it won't matter. It doesn't need the thorough scrubbing that this needs. And I don't want much, but I'm going to cut them really fine. And then I get this nice, thin, sort of silky leek that's subtler in flavor than a yellow onion. And I'm just going to mix it right into my cheese. So this cheese is going to have a few layers of flavor in it. It's going to have a little bit of raw leek, and it's going to have a little bit of caramelized onion when this is ready. So now that we've got a little more color on these onions, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to take a little bit of, this is veal stock because I'm kind of approximating French onion soup. And I'm using this to kind of lift all those caramelized bits off of the bottom of the pan and mix them with the onion. And you really get this sort of French onion soup vibe. And now we've got these nice coated onions that I'm going to mix right in with our cheese. And we're ready to make our grilled cheese sandwich. You can use any bread you like. We happen to make our own sourdough here, so I'm going to use that. And it's great sandwich bread. It's nice and firm. And I'm going to fire up this saute pan. I'm going to butter the bread. And then I'm not even bothering putting any butter in the pan. Well, I might put a few drops of oil because I don't want this next mystery ingredient to stick. So I've got some butter here, and if you just want a buttery crust on the sandwich, so be it. But I thought it would be fun to take a dry cheese like Parmesan and sprinkle it on and sort of pack it onto the butter. And then I'm going to put it face down in the pan as soon as this butter melts, so that not only do I get cheese on the inside of my sandwich, I get a little bit on the outside as well, and it's all crispy and delicious. So here goes, face down, and the other side. I'm going to drop a little more butter in the pan just to kind of go under the edges of the bread, keep any of that cheese from sticking. It's a non-stick pan, so it shouldn't be a big deal. Then I'm going to take my mixture of raclette and caramelized onions and raw leeks and just put it right on top here. Obviously the classic grilled cheese sandwich is made with just American cheese, which I think we do just because it melts evenly and easily. I know raclette is a little bit animal and a little bit stinky, so it's not for everyone. But other cheeses that melt really well, Fontina is great. Havarti is a really melty cheese, and those are milder cheeses. The Fontina's actually got a little bit of an acidic bite to it. The Havarti's really soft and mild, and you can choose your cheese accordingly. I'm going to take a look and see where we are here. Let me give it another minute and get a little more color on this sandwich. I'm just going to flip this and look at that crispy Parmesan melted onto the top of the sandwich. There we go. And you can just feel that crisp crust on there. We're just gonna give it a quick cut. The cheese, as you can see inside, is all melty and delicious and stringy and beautiful. All right, I've got a nice warm plate and bowl so they don't pull all the heat out of my soup and my sandwich, because that's where half the comfort comes from, is the fact that this is a nice hot meal. There's my smoked tomato soup. And here's my French onion grilled cheese sandwich. There it is, our smoked tomato soup and French onion grilled cheese sandwich. You can find the recipe in the description below the video, and I invite you to feast anytime. Thanks.